right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 204 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I'm Billy Bob. I'm on the West Coast. I've got my regular co-host streaming live from his dacha in Crimea. He's on his cell phone right now. Ian Cummer. So thanks for joining me, Ian. It's probably not morning for you. I think it's 7 p.m.-ish. But I always say good morning, even though it's not. And then Greg, it is morning for Greg. He's our special guest in Chicago, Illinois, streaming at 11 a.m., I believe, in Chicago time. Today's episode, like I said, episode 204 of Blowback, and it is entitled The Energy War and the Containment of China. Can the Empire Succeed? So this topic I came up with, and I want to discuss this topic, but I understand that there's a premise contained within this topic that is not really universally accepted or embraced. And so I'm pretty sure Ian and Greg both take exception to my premise that there is an energy war predicated on containing China, being pursued by the United States and the West in general. So, we're gonna not jump right into that disagreement. And first thing we're gonna do is talk about Ian's article this morning, his most recent article. You can read it at readingjunkie.com, and it's a good one. It is about the Iranian diaspora and how they are, one person in particular, how they've just been promoting and trying to get regime change in Iran and using propaganda. And using propaganda very insidiously, very subtly and tactfully and strategically, to turn Western minds against Iran. And so one of the images that I appreciated from Ian's article was, it had these two nefarious looking Iranian women in burqas, dragging a little Iranian girl. And the little Iranian girl.
Billy Bob.
Go ahead.
Billy Bob, do you want to actually share the screen? You can even share the screen. I would, but I'm on my phone right now.
No, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That is a good idea. It's going to be a little. You're gonna have to be wait a second while I try to do that. But the point, the interesting issue with that image was the. Yeah, I can't do two things at once. It's too. So here we go. So I got the image up. So let me go to present, share screen, and then Reading Junkie share. Okay. So can you see that yet? Is it coming?
Yep, it's there.
So two nefarious, evil people grabbing our hero, the punk is dead, rebellious, Iranian girl. And who are we going to side with? Like, this is a real oppressive regime. And, the Iranian people, they just want freedom. They just want to be free. And so, so this is the kind of insidious propaganda that appeals to, a mindset that has been shaped by a particular culture, right? So it's really, it's complex. It's complex and it's sophisticated propaganda. And so this is the kind of thing we're up against. And as Ian notes, correctly in his article, it's not just propaganda, to one kind of person. They understand that they have created many different kinds of frameworks and mindsets. And so they appeal, they have propaganda appealing to the different kinds of mindsets that our culture has created. But Ian, can you speak better to what I'm trying to get at? You want to say it in your own words?
So the tie-in with that article with news is that's Marjan Satrapi, who is an Iranian expat who lives in France. She died. They didn't actually give an exact date for when she died. The family announced it on June 4th. So she'd been living there for many years, since I guess the 90s. And she was famous for writing a graphic novel called Persepolis, which is sort of an adapted autobiography for experiences leading up to it as a child, leading up to and during the revolution, then as a young adult after the revolution, the Iran-Iraq War, and all that. And it's a very compelling story. It's very well written. The art's very good. She also directed the movie adaptation, which was an animated movie, and that's actually where the title image is from the movie. And in that scene, she's a young girl. She goes to she has that jacket which she wrote on, kind of a provocative "punk is not dead," kind of a provocative, rebellious message on it, and goes out to buy black market tapes of Western singers. I think it was Michael Jackson and maybe a couple other people. I don't remember which tapes she bought. So she went out to this black market vendor to buy some tapes that you weren't supposed to listen to, and these old hags stop her, dressed in the full, not even just the hijab, just the full, almost a full burqa minus the head covering, and they're of course, angry with her, and they stop her in the street, harass her on the street. So it's what's interesting about, what's compelling about that narrative is that it's more nuanced than, especially in the time period, because she published Persepolis. I think the first one was in 2002. And of course, at the time, we just saw the very, very over-the-top dehumanizing propaganda of anybody Islamic and in the Middle East that we saw at the time. And of course, a lot of liberals and leftists didn't like that, because of course it's very dehumanizing, it's very racist, it's very fascist to say these people deserve to be killed because they're inherently evil and all that. So what expats like Marjan did was they gave a more progressive, a more what's the word I'm looking for? More nuanced the stance. I was like, hey, the regime is bad. Doesn't mean the people are bad. It's just the regime is bad. It's these, this minority of extremists that have taken control of the country. So it's a much more progressive and educated stance on it. So Western liberals could say, hey, and even Western leftists, it's targeted at those left-leaning Marxists, left-leaning liberal progressive types of people, right? And it's explicitly like, hey, look, especially because they emphasize, she especially emphasizes is that her grandfather was a communist who was actually who fled the Shah's regime and hid in the Soviet Union. Then after the Shah was deposed, he came back, and then he was actually executed by the revolutionary regime. Actually, executed him. So she gives this. Hey, there were leftists, there were communists who were who supported overthrowing the Shah, and but then the new regime turned on them. So she gives a very compelling narrative for left-leaning people in the USA, Western countries, but it still takes them to the same destination. It's a different route, but it's the same. It's like that meme. It's a different route, but it's the same destination. They're like, oh, I'm not like those, those bigoted, uneducated conservatives. I'm a progressive, educated, leftist, Marxist person, but still agree that Iran needs regime change. So it's like Billy Bob. I think Billy Bob, you described what I was trying to say well. It's targeting different groups of people with different flavors of propaganda to make them support the same thing, which in this case was Iran needs regime change. And that you can kind of see how when Trump actually bit the bullet and actually tried to do it, you can see how the narrative started out. Well, we have to overthrow the regime because they killed all those innocents. They killed the 30 billion innocent unarmed protesters. And then when the war wasn't going well, we're a couple weeks into it, our bases were being hit. Israel kept getting hit. Got very more. It is just like, well, if they don't surrender, we need to wipe them out. So we kind of see it was all just kind of a facade. It was just a very humanitarian wrapping, but inside it was just surrender or die kind of package underneath it.
And you kind of allude to the fact that even when she chose her pen name, which is I forget what it was, but you can tell me.
It was Marjan Satrapi. So satrapi is off the word of satrap, which is it's an allusion to ancient Persia. Satrap was a governor and so they had this whole political system, and the satrap was the head guy in one particular region. So it's a reference to this one of their early modes of government. So by choosing that pen name, anybody who's looking that up, who's just interested in Iranian history and culture, is going to come across her because she picked that name. And also even the title of the book and the movie, Persepolis, is the ancient capital city that still exists. It's not populated, but there's ruins. But it was the capital city of Darius the Great and his son Xerxes. They built that city, and it was the capital of the Persian Empire until Alexander the Great conquered it. So just by picking those, there's something called search engine optimization. When you're building a website or a blog or whatever, you want to optimize your content so the search engines like it and will recommend your content to people looking for those topics. So she picked her brand, and again, she did pick her brand after the internet. So this was the early 2000s. There was Google. You had all this, search engine optimization was a thing. So she picked a name that would work very well in modern marketing, and it would also overwrite words people would search for if they're just interested in Iranian culture and history.
Yeah. So some thinking, some serious consideration, and some use and value from picking that particular name just to show up on search engines. And of course, our high tech oligarchy is interested already in promoting those voices that are in alignment with U.S. Western imperialist interests. And so this is just how it works. Now, it's kind of similar about Shen Yun, right? Shen Yun is the Chinese, dance troupe, play. I don't know, what do? They do acrobatics and all kinds of things, and they go from city to city in the United States, just talking about how evil the Chinese Communist Party was and how beautiful and great China was prior to communism. And this lady kind of performs that same thing for Iran. She talks about how great Iran was before the revolution, blah, blah, blah. But, and then it gets promoted and it benefits the ruling class, geopolitical interests. And so these are just the kind of things that rise to the top of the echo chamber and are promoted and are, shoved into everybody's face. And this is just the reality that, we have to contend with. And most people are just completely blissfully ignorant of any kind of underhanded imperialist motivation and just take it at face value. Yeah, I love punk, and I was like her in middle school, and yeah, I fucking hate that regime. Like, good, we're bombing it. Good, that regime's evil, and that's just the knee jerk reaction that most Americans have because they don't know any better. Now I was gonna pivot to Putin, and we were gonna talk about. I want to get Ian's take on this idea that Putin's under a lot of pressure, and that everybody's angry that he's not doing more in the war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we haven't heard from Greg. I don't know if Greg wants to weigh in on the topic that we were just discussing before we move on, as far as propaganda or Iran, anything.
I'm curious what Ian thinks about the Putin stories, because it's, spreading into, the commentators that we all listen to, like John Helmer in particular has
Yeah,
been.
Gilbert Doctorow has been saying it for a while. He's been on the Judge, which is a very popular program. But yeah, Helmer's another one. Um, So yeah, Ian, we want to hear your thoughts. You are in the belly of the beast. No, we shouldn't call it that. That would be Washington D.C. But you live in Russia. You have an apartment, I think, still in Moscow. You got your dacha in Crimea, and so you're rubbing elbows with actual Russians. What is your perspective on the whole thesis that Putin is in dangerous territory and he better do something or he risks being removed from office? I'm not sure.
I don't think it's. I mean, that's. I mean, they say that every day, and it's not um, a thing that's going to happen. So I mean, we had Biden, who was a vegetable. No one removed him from office. They just let him finish his term. Nobody, even though they had the grounds, they actually had constitutionally had the grounds to remove him from office, but they didn't. And then we're kind of going through the same thing with Trump. So now with a normal country and under normal circumstances, it's really unlikely for something like that to happen. But it is true. His most recent popularity rating or survey that they do, it was lower than previously. It was 65%, which was considerably lower than his previous one, which was in the 80s. And there are domestic reasons for that. They are messing with the mobile internet. They've been messing with the mobile internet on the outer regions and the border regions for years, but they started messing with it in even the major cities. Like even in Moscow, they messed with the mobile internet. And the reason for that is because of the drone threat. The drones very often have a SIM card, and they use the cell phone towers to self-locate. So even if the mobile, if they don't even need the GPS, they just use the towers to triangulate their position. So it's not even a GPS related function. So they've been messing with the mobile internet to prevent that from happening, which is unpopular because if you're a business owner or you're somebody who just wants to use the internet for some reason, like for your phone navigation or whatever, that's annoying to not be able to do it. They've also increased the firewall restrictions on a lot of Western websites lately, even ones they'd previously allowed, which is annoying. They've also declared war on VPN, so they mess with the VPN services. And actually, that's the reason I'm on my phone right now, because I just couldn't find a service that had a fast enough ping to do a live stream. So I'm on my phone the last couple times because I'm still having some issues on that. So yeah, that's annoying. I mean, I'm annoyed they have to be on my phone instead of, because I even bought a microphone because that's like an ongoing meme in this show that somebody in the audience complains I have bad audio, and then I finally bought a microphone, but it's for the computer, and then I started having VPN problems. So yeah, so there's a lot of reasons people are annoyed. However, it's
Telegram too, right?
And I even see
Telegram.
They did crack down on Telegram. I don't actually really even blame them for cracking down on Telegram after Pavel Durov, if you guys remember that. He got actually arrested in France. They detained him. They did this huge smear campaign, basically accusing him of being a pedophile and helping pedophiles. It was just this really, really nasty experience. They just called it like the most awful things on earth. They just says every bad thing that happens on earth is your fault. Personally, drugs, human is all his fault. Personally, his fault. And then I guess he gave him what they wanted, some backdoor access to Telegram. which he apparently gave him because they let him go. So, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yes, I don't blame the Russia for not, especially because military people were tending to use it as a secure form of communication, but it's not, can't really be trusted anymore. So I don't blame them necessarily for cracking down on Telegram. But the point is, people are annoyed by the restrictions. I think people in general are annoyed by this very reconciliatory, because Putin's a very pro-Western. I mean, his government's very pro-Western. It's very pro-USA in particular. So they've had this kind of endless trying to keep the door open for reconciliation. And people are tired. It's like, well, why are we doing that? I think so you have a very pro-Western government and a population that's really not pro-Western and are tired of it. But so I answer Squidbats. The last time Squidbats donated to my Buy Me a Coffee page, I want to say yes, it did go through. I actually responded to it. Actually, fun fact about Buy Me a Coffee, they actually, I made a withdrawal to my bank from Buy Me a Coffee, and they deleted my account and accused me of being a Russian. I actually had to show them my American passport before they reinstated my account. Wow. So I actually lost Buy Me a Coffee for a while. That wasn't anything Russia did. Buy Me a Coffee deleted me, accused me of being Russian, and deleted me. But yeah, this commenter here, the bird, spirit of Anchorage. Yeah, so Putin still talks about the spirit of Anchorage. They're still very enthusiastic about promises that the Trump administration made. I think it's baseless optimism at this point, because I don't see MAGA doing well in the midterms. Even if Trump does turn around and seriously try to live up to his promises, well, in a few months, I don't think we're going to have enough MAGA people left in Congress and the Senate to even do anything. And then after that, another 2 years, I'm going to be extremely surprised if whoever Trump's successor is, whether it's J.D. Vance, whoever the MAGA, Trump endorsed successor is. I think that person's going to have a very hard time in the election. So it's just like, what is the point of dealing with Trump when he's the definition lame duck administration at this point? So,
yeah, that gets us to
what's the point of negotiating with that?
What is going to change? How are things going to change between now and the midterms? If ostensibly, if Trump can get a deal with Iran, like he's been promising like 37 times over the last several months, they could do better. But it seems like they don't really want to deal, and because they don't want to deal, it seems like the economy is going to necessarily not do so well, and that he is going to do bad in the midterms. He doesn't really care personally because, he's not up for election, but you just assume that, the Democrats are going to, make his life miserable for the next 2 years if they win, and he wouldn't want that. But at the same time, how can he do anything to keep that from happening? So part of me thinks that we're just headed towards something big will happen that is outside of, what is going on now. Like there's going to be a big event between now and the midterms that's just going to change the paradigm. And what that is exactly, I don't know. It could just be, an escalation of the war, and like what we thought would have happened last week, right? The bombing intensifies. Iran tells Israel not to bomb Beirut. Israel bombs Beirut. Iran attacks Israel. Israel responds. And then Trump tells everybody to stand down ostensibly and just, hey, let's just behave. But, can this continue until November or even, through the summer? And every day that it continues, the global economy is getting worse and worse and worse. And so, and again, even if nothing does happen in a big way, just by November, the incremental, decrease of the global economy, the incremental breakdown by November is going to be tremendously awful for people. Way more so than it is right now. But
well, oil experts and everybody have been predicting for months we're in trouble, but it's yet to materialize, which
yeah.
it's really
the stock
something.
market, oil futures are, it just seems insane. Oil futures, they're saying, I don't know how the oil futures are speculating out, but they're saying it's like $90 a barrel in the future. Currently, what is
it goes
what is
down
Asia,
into the 70s by to the end of the year, I guess, next year.
and then the actual price that Asians and Europeans are paying is what? It's like, I don't know, 120, 130. What they're actually paying right now for oil is just completely different from what oil futures are trading.
People are taking deliveries of these futures, I assume, that have been trading so cheap too. So it's real.
What's real? The future price?
People are saying, well, the spot market's trading at 120 plus and the futures is trading at 90. But if people hold these futures contracts, they're buying oil at 90 for months too. Futures you can take delivery with.
So that future price could represent a real price if there is I guess maybe supply and demand, right? If the demand goes down, the supply goes up, that's going to bring the price down. But it just seems like it's going like things are trending the opposite direction. Like it just seems that the supply continues to decrease, and the demand doesn't seem to be decreasing. And so it's just hard to understand why the futures are where they're at. Especially it's just because the trend, right? So right now we have a certain supply and demand, and it just seems the trend, there's no rational reason to believe that trend is going to change, and that supply will decrease or supply will increase and demand will decrease. Like, I don't know how you talk yourself into believing that it's true. But so I kind of think that the markets are rigged, that the futures, that the price is rigged, that there's the plunge protection team that involves all the main financial leaders, the Fed, and different the Security and Exchange Commission. So there's different members on this plunge protection team, and they're just engaged in this effort to stabilize things. And I would argue in pursuit of a greater agenda that's going on. And what we're seeing isn't a real market, right? We're not seeing a real market. We're seeing huge market distortions that are being deliberately manipulated behind the scenes by the by the powers that be, that have the tools behind the scenes to do this. And so the plunge protection team is a real thing.
It can be manipulated for this long. Because like I said, tons of oil is actually trading at these low prices. So, you can do it short term, especially when they're trading at 4 a.m, shorting the markets and, making it look like big, smart money is moving stuff. But, there's enough real players in oil, the producers and the refiners that are actually using it, that it couldn't stay this out of whack for this long. And from what I've been looking into, inventories are getting drawn down, as people are saying, both commercial and the official ones. And then China's only importing half as much as they normally do. So there's a lot less demand on the remaining oil that's out there.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, so there's a lot of less demand due to China's, so not receiving those imports. Like half their imports they're not getting, and so those can go to other places. Some of them though have been shut down, but yeah, prior to the war, China was filling its reserves plus taking more for its thing. And now they're tapping their reserves, and so they're not filling their reserves. So there is a lot of um, supply that is available to others that was previously going to China. And I mean that's all true, but but I think when you look at the big picture, there is just um, I think because of the reserves. I think once the U.S. reserve, once the Chinese reserve, which the Chinese reserve could last another year at least, but the U.S. reserve definitely can't last another year, and the reserves of other countries can't last that much longer. And so I think there's that's going to be we'll start to see a difference then once once the reserves run dry. The United States will get hit worse, and so will these other countries. And so that is definitely part of the explanation why the futures markets are still changing. But again, that's the point. If it's a futures market, and the future is that the reserves are going to go dry and they're not going to be able to access them, like, again, that's their trajectory. And you'd think the futures market would calculate that trajectory into the current futures market, and you would see a better equilibrium between the spot price, what they're actually paying, which is way, 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 way higher than the futures market. But anyway, it's it's complicated, and I have to think that there are non-market forces, big investors with big hedge funds moving money and stabilizing this thing in a way that wouldn't otherwise be stable if it was just strictly market principles at play. But anyway, I can't prove anything. I could just have suspicion and try and articulate, what I see is going on. So
I mean, we do have, the Trump effect too, right? Every day, practically, we're on the verge of the deal.
yes, no, great point. And he's really done a great job of calming the markets, threatening things the minute the market closes, and then saying no, everything's good. We're almost at our agreement. They're about to surrender, right before the markets open, and that's been going on. And you just think that people would stop listening. But so let's talk about that. I definitely
we had it again just this week, right? The Iran-Israel fighting stopped on Monday.
Yeah. So yeah, Israel's real provocative attack on Beirut that they were explicitly told not to do, and if they did, Iran would retaliate. That took place on a Saturday morning, after the markets closed, and then by Monday, Trump is promising everyone, peace in our time, and we're so close to an agreement. Yeah, and that's that.
And I'm taking charge of Israel.
That's a good one. So. Ian, do you want to jump in on that? Like, how do you account for this this discussion between Netanyahu and Trump? Trump saying Netanyahu does what I want. It's interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon, and we've never seen it before.
Well, remember several shows, more than several shows ago, is 4 or 5 shows ago when I shared that I want to say it was a New York Times. I think it was a New York Times article claiming that there was infighting within the Trump administration about attacking Iran, and basically the Israel lobby was the only group that wanted to do it. Everybody else was against it. And at the time I said, that might be some Monday morning quarterback going on. Maybe initially everybody was on board with the idea, but then when it turned into just a disaster, a quagmire, everybody was distancing themselves. So I think there was definitely distancing. Rubio and all these other guys don't want to be associated with something that's not going well. So I think there is a kernel of truth to that Netanyahu AIPAC and these, the Israel lobby, really wants this Iran war, and I do think there's something to be said for the fact that their support is collapsing. It's collapsing in both Republicans and Democrats. And basically, people over 60, conservatives, not even liberals, conservatives over 60 are basically the only people left, which fortunately includes our entire government because, they're all over 60 for the most part. But they're basically the only people left in the USA who still view Israel positively. So I do think there's probably some panic in Israel. Because I do think I wouldn't quite call the USA a democracy, but when there is some critical mass of people when just everybody hates Israel, it's just not even politically feasible for the government to conceive, if they want to continue supporting it, right? There's some critical mass, it's political suicide to support Israel. I think Biden might be the first. I can't think of anyone else. He might, Kamala Harris, almost the same thing. Kamala Harris might be the first presidential candidate who actually explicitly lost an election from supporting Israel, because that was the main reason. The people who did not, but who boycotted or did a protest vote in the elections, if I recall correctly, a third of them specifically mentioned Gaza and Palestine, right? So I think that's more than enough to say if they had not supported Israel, it's a very high chance they would have won the election. And I can't think of any other election, at least in my lifetime, where that happened. I mean, who else lost not because they were against Israel, because they supported Israel. And now Trump, I think if Trump and the MAGA movement gets, there's going to be a lot of reasons they lose, but getting into a quagmire in support of Israel, I think really broke up what was left of their coalition. I mean, basically the only people left who still like Trump are, again, the old conservatives, and Jews. I mean, those are the two groups that still like Trump. Mark Levin, of course, loves Trump. Ben Shapiro loves Trump. The old Lindsey Graham loves Trump. The usual sus. It's like, wow, what a team. Those are your guys. Like Charlie Kirk's dead. Tucker Carlson walked away. Candace Owens walked away. All of the actual conservative right-wing people that you kind of want supporting you have walked away, or actually had a falling out, like Massey. I mean, it's just, I've never seen a movement implode like MAGA has. I mean, they really imploded. The elections are not going to be pretty for them. So, and now we have this. So now we have the situation where, I mean, allegedly even Trump's fed up with Israel. We don't know how much of that is theater and how much of it is real. I do think. Tucker Carlson has. I mean, I don't think he has a reason to lie, but he says because he was one of the main people meeting Trump repeatedly, trying to get him to not attack Iran, which I believe. I don't think Tucker lied about doing that. He said he visited him at least 3 times to try to talk him out of attacking Iran. And Trump pretty much just straight up told him he was doing it for Israel. Which again, could all be theater, but I don't think, we have that many people saying the same thing. I don't think Tucker Carlson lied about that, especially since now he's had a divorce from Trump. I just don't think, I think it's true. And so that leaves kind of everybody in a difficult position, because Netanyahu knows he has a strained relationship with Trump. Maybe, and that's maybe like Billy Bob mentioned, he times the bombing of Beirut on a Saturday, so it would piss in Trump soup, but not so much it would crash the markets and piss him off too much. Maybe that's some political calculus he did. I do think they absolutely want to ruin the deal, because I think Netanyahu personally is in very dire straits. I think all the stuff they said about Putin is true, but it's about Netanyahu, not Putin. I think it's Netanyahu who's in very serious trouble right now. Israel's in very serious trouble. They can't afford. I mean, I think even as a political entity, Israel might not survive if they lose U.S. support and just end up stuck in this escalation cycle against Iran without U.S. support. They're toast. So they're really playing this game of, everybody's playing a game, and I think there is personal profit involved. I mean, definitely. I mean, we can't say there's not at this point personal profit in it, which is unfortunately also influencing these decisions. But I don't even know where to go from here on what they can do.
Greg, did you?
Ian
I thought you were
froze.
going to say something.
Yeah. Ian froze, but I was going to say I read an interesting item in Israeli media yesterday, highlighting how whenever we hear Trump or Biden is cursing out Netanyahu, it's very likely theater. That U.S. Central Command was working closely with Israel on their attack on Iran, and U.S. was helping defend against the retaliation, just according to Israeli media, which I believe. So, yeah, I mean, Trump even admitted
Was this in reference
fighting
to the
with
attack? 'Cause I think
Netanyahu
that I don't.
part of the disinformation. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I don't think it was. I mean, did you mean that they worked hand in hand with the targeting of Iran? I don't think that was ever denied. That was openly admitted from the beginning.
Well, and probably it was a bunch of
targeting
Israeli jets, so we can assume, helping avoid air defenses and maybe refueling.
So the public theater, for mass consumption was that, Trump is getting irritated by the accusation and the allegation that Israel is controlling him, that he's doing things for Israel. And so Trump, in response, said straight out, no, Bibi does what I tell him to do, right? So he's being clear that he doesn't appreciate, all these narratives saying that Israel controls the White House and that, Trump will have to do whatever Bibi tells him to do. That bothers him, and so he's pushing back. But I think, from my perspective, I can, kind of perceive all of that to be theater. And I think that they're working behind the scenes in tandem, to prosecute this, this campaign against Iran. And, again, every campaign has contradictions that you have to manage. It has, setbacks, and you've got to deal with the reality. But, if you're approaching,
I want to interject.
Okay. Go ahead.
I mean, you say it's all theater. Well, I mean, are they deliberately losing a war to Iran? Is that the what? I mean, so I think the issue. I mean, because I hear that it's all theater.
No, the fighting,
but
with
I don't think they're intentionally right. But I mean, if you're losing a war, is that not in of itself a valid reason for infighting? If you're losing, I don't think anyone went into this project expecting to lose, and they are losing. I think that's a legitimate reason to be pissed off at each other when they're losing. If it was a success, of course they could. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I see what you're saying, and I mean, I have a particular framework with which I approach, these events, and so within my framework, I don't particularly think they're losing the strategy, right? So if you're interested in, decreasing overall global energy availability, and if you're interested in, controlling the limited energy that remains, you can see the metrics. Like the metrics, this strategy is objectively being successful, even though they haven't achieved regime change in Iran. And I think it's possible that the planners, that what is really going on is that, they didn't really ever actually expect to be able to regime change Iran. And they fully expected that, just like in Syria, regime change might take some decades. They're going to, they're making their way across the stream, feeling the stones, and, continuing forward with a particular destination in mind. And so that process took, decades to succeed in Syria. It's an ongoing process with Russia right now. So I just think that looking at it as it's a loss. They lost. They didn't get regime change. I don't know. I think that's a limited approach and perspective. And I think, again, I think they have bigger, huge global shifts that they are intending to achieve, and they're working towards that goal. And they haven't been dissuaded. They're continuing to work towards that goal, and they're dealing with the challenges that arise as they arise. And there's a lot of challenges, but that best explains, in my opinion, what I just said best explains the nonsense that we've been seeing from Trump. About 37 times he's been saying that, we're close to a deal. I don't think he's blocking a deal. He doesn't want a deal. They are not pursuing a deal. Trump does not want a deal. Trump wants surrender or to continue the status quo. And to, so if Trump wanted a deal, he could have had a deal before the war even started. And it's not about nukes. So this, in my opinion, is all theater. It is also theater that, there's a disagreement between Israel and the United States, right? I don't see them as separate entities. Like from my perspective, they're one country or one nation or one part of, one empire, and they're pursuing the empire's agenda together. Now, Brian Berletic always talks about which path to Persia. The issue is selling this. How do you sell it? What kind of theater do you use to sell what's going on? And especially if you understand that what is going on is not going to be popular. What's going on is going to be bad for most humans, for most of humanity. And so how do you sell that? And so, which path to Persia talked about, blame it on Bibi. Blame it on Bibi Netanyahu, and, let him take the blame. And that way, Trump can say, hey, I'm working for peace. And we'll see how it plays out. Ultimately, I could definitely see a resurgence, a very hot war, a much more devastating war that does end up really destroying, again, Gulf energy export capacity, really crippling the global economy. And Trump saying, well, it's freaking Bibi did it. It's all Bibi's fault. And I have the receipts. New York Times said I was against Bibi, and this motherfucker just went crazy. So I don't know, that could play out. It could not play out, but I just don't. I don't know. I just disagree with the idea that we had a loss and it's over. So my question is, Ian.
I mean, it's an incredible statement to say it's like saying they intentionally lost in Iraq. It's 12-dimensional. I think it's the simplest explanation is that they just underestimated the enemy and lost. And you brought up Syria. Well, I know everybody's kind of brain dumped it now, but if I can remember in 2015, when Russia first announced intervening in Syria, I remember how upset they were. They were upset, like emotional about, like Hillary Clinton just outright said if she wanted to go to war with Russia because over Syria, which is they eventually walked. I mean, her staff walked back those statements basically. Well, she was misinterpreted, but I think a lot of people in power were legitimately. It was very embarrassing for Obama, the whole Syria thing. It was a big embarrassment for Obama. It was a big embarrassment for everybody's in his administration, including Hillary Clinton, who is supposed to be the next president. So yeah, that was. I don't think that was expected, and it did upset them. I don't think anyone anticipated having to, how Iran stayed in the fight. I do think they meant for
Do
that
you
to be
think
over
they?
in a couple days,
Ian,
and
do you
just, I
think
mean,
they didn't
if they planned,
anticipate
well,
that
if there was,
they
well,
were going to close the
why
Strait
was
of
there
Hormuz?
so little? I mean, no, I don't think they expected that at all, or
So
that they
no,
would have the ability to enforce it. No, I don't. I mean, why would they deliberately lose a war? Answer that. Why would they intentionally lose? Why not just win it? And that would achieve the same. Would that not achieve the same thing to win it? Why would they intentionally lose it? I mean, that's.
well, I
It sounds
you
like.
disagree with the premise that I snuck into the title of this episode, and I disagree with the premise that you snuck into that question. So
If they defeated Iran, if the goal was to starve China of energy, wouldn't defeating Iran accomplish that? Why would they deliberately lose a war with Iran so they could cut off Chinese energy? That's just. It sounds like.
yeah.
It sounds like a Trump supporter. Like if I was tasked with defending Donald Trump, that does sound like something I would say. I'd be like, well, he did that deliberately. He meant to lose. He meant to get his bases blown up by
The goal
Iran.
was
He
close
like
the
they
Strait of
played right
Hormuz.
into his hand. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, I mean
And I'm lost.
we're talking kind of past each other. I mean, there's some things that you're saying that are true, and I agree with. I think the point is that it's things aren't over. Like the United States hasn't decided to stop pursuing global hegemony because they failed to regime change Iran, and I don't think that their whole plan for global hegemony and securing themselves in peace and safety for their oligarch interests throughout the rest of the 21st century hinged upon a regime change in Iran in February. Like, I mean, they initiated something, and now they're going to manage that, and they're going to continue to fight and put pressure. And so it's like viewing it as a very through a very narrow lens of winning or losing a particular battle in the grand struggle for global hegemony, I just think is misguided. And I think you're missing the forest for the trees, and you're like looking through things through a straw where you should remove the straw and just look at the big whole chessboard. But I don't think they
But
want
Billy,
to.
if
I
we
think,
look
again,
at the
ideally,
whole,
hold on, let me make one more point. Ideally, China surrenders tomorrow, and Russia surrenders tomorrow, and Iran surrenders tomorrow. That's what they want. But just because that doesn't happen doesn't mean they're going to give up. It doesn't mean they've lost. So this whole idea that they've lost and it's over, like I don't get that. It just seems a weird thing to say. Greg, what were you going to say?
I think there is a major loss, including the war to Iran is over, and the U.S. has lost its basing in the Middle East for the most part, which is huge. It's lost the entire Gulf,
Okay, and
which
I think
is the most valuable part of our empire, arguably. Part FDR been building, starting at the end of World War II.
But you're familiar with my conspiracy theory, and so you ought to know that within my conspiratorial framework that that's a sacrifice that they're willing to make, right? That part of the plan is to control global energy, and so if they take offline Middle East energy, well, that just kind of props up the U.S. dollar, because now everybody's dependent on energy controlled by the United States. They're going to have to buy it in U.S. dollars. And that's what we've seen. We've seen increased dependency on U.S. energy from Europe. We've seen increased dependency by Asia. And that trend is going to continue. And so, again, my assertion years ago is that this was the plan that we're seeing unfold. So,
But Billy, the petrodollar falls apart without the Gulf states pouring in their dollars to the U.S. Treasury. And number two, the U.S. does not have the oil or gas to fill in, meaning we're going to experience demand destruction, economic depression, not, a new dawn
I'm
of
not
the U.S.
sure
empire.
that you're doing anything other than describing what I've been suggesting is going to happen for a couple of years now. And so
But
it's
those
not
things
really,
don't help the U.S., even in theory. Destroying the major source of petrodollars and, a big chunk of world energy consumption demand does not help the U.S. empire resurge.
Well, you'd get hyperinflation, because the reason we don't have hyperinflation now is because mainly the Gulf states are using so many dollars. Even if we could, I mean, realistically, how much oil could the USA sell in dollars? I mean, it wouldn't come even close to what the Gulf states sell, which means you would dip below a certain, I'm sure there would be hyperinflation.
Right. We don't have 15,
because that's
20
what keeps the
million
petrodollar
barrels
afloat, and why they can.
extra.
Yeah.
Exactly.
well, so Greg, I mean, you just made the assertion that this strategy isn't going to be beneficial to the United States empire, and so
It's not
that's
even
why,
logical that it would be implemented.
right? No, that's your argument, and I mean, I disagree with that take, and I think that
Well, what does the U.S. Treasury think it's going to do to replace all those Gulf dollars coming in? I mean, what's going to prevent what Ian just said? That the dollar would collapse without all that.
Well, if you have a monopoly of global energy and other people are forced to buy your energy and they're forced to buy it in US dollars.
There's not 10 million barrels a day that the U.S. can send out into the world. U.S. is a net importer,
what's going to
remember.
happen?
What?
So, I mean, what's going to happen? So, yeah, I understand what you're saying is that the U.S. doesn't have enough export capacity to make up for what gets lost in the Gulf. But I'm saying all that means is that certain countries are going to suffer. But the United States doesn't care about that. The United States is going to be getting all the high super profits because their energy is going to be in such high demand. That's going to prop up the dollar. That's also going to renationalize our economy, because European industry is going to have to come here where the energy is affordable. And so I think there's a plan, and I think it makes sense. I agree with you that it's not going to succeed, but I think there's a logic there, and I think that's where we disagree. You say there's no logic. It doesn't make any sense.
You can't even write it on paper where it would make sense. If there's 15 million barrels of dollars worth coming into the U.S. per day from the Gulf, and that's cut off, there's no amount of price increase or U.S. cornering the market that can fix that. It's just way too much lost currency recirculating.
Because it's not cornering. Because it's not cornering the market that fixes the problem. Even if that happened, and the USA had 100% of the market, which it doesn't. We're talking about volume. It's the volume of petrodollars that keeps the inflation away and allows the USA to service its almost $40 trillion debt. What we're trying to say is that even if the US had 100% of the oil market, it would be a smaller market than what the Gulf states are providing, and that's not enough dollars to keep stop inflation, because it's the volume that keeps it's having that the certain number of dollars changing hands per day that keeps the value of the dollar stable and the exchange rate of the dollar stable.
Again, I think if the United States controls global oil supply, if they control the the arteries that global oil has to pass through to go to wherever, that is going to support the U.S. dollar. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's go with what I'm saying is nonsense. It's not what's going on. So you guys see what's going on. So let me ask you, Greg, just what's going to happen then? If what you're saying is true, how is this going to play out? And then what are the variables? What are the issues that could go either way? And what are those ways it could go? It's like it seems that you know if the U.S. wants to salvage what's going on in West Asia and maintain, Richard Medhurst explains that they're moving from the petrodollar system to the gas system, so to U.S. natural gas, and that's going to be the new basis for the U.S. currency. But no, I get that you disagree. So, but if that's not what's going on, what is the United States going to do? And how is it going to look? How is it going to play out? Like, I mean, can you give us a narrative that is accessible and we can appreciate and ponder?
I mean, it's closest to, like I said last time I was on, the Suez Canal crisis for the British. This is a major jump-off point for decline. This was the U.S.'s war that it shouldn't have done, and is going to really damage it structurally. So basically, just a mistake that is going to ultimately result in a weakening and a decline in the power, economic power, military power, political power of the United States and the Western Empire, essentially. Yeah. So, how is the U.S. going to respond to that? What is Trump going to do? What are the Democrats going to do? Like, what do they want to see happen? How do they salvage that? I don't think they can at this point. And at some point, Trump's going to have to declare victory and go home, right? I mean, because oil prices are going to eventually rise. And, I don't think he's suicidal politically. Well, I mean, Trump's not up for re-election, so he's going to be there. But yeah, it would be right for the midterms, though. He'll spend the next 2 years under investigation, fighting impeachment. I mean, he's not going to like that. So okay, so you're saying the reason why he hasn't just negotiated a deal and put this all behind us for the benefit of the American empire is because what? The Israel lobby and his own inability to say he was wrong? Yeah, taking a loss as a narcissist, as an empire, is hard. And as long as oil stays reasonably low, he's going to try to avoid it. So I think it's over. There's nothing he can do. I mean, that's why, he's trying to pretend he doesn't want Israel to attack. And he's constantly proclaiming that we're about to get a deal on U.S. terms, which is fantasy because the losers don't set terms. Yeah, I mean,
I think I have to agree. I have to agree. I mean, I was assuming I was giving very pessimistic statements in our early shows back in March, if you remember those, because I was assuming that that losing to Iran would be such a huge strategic loss. The U.S. would eat the losses necessary to win it, just to avoid that strategic loss. But once the ceasefire happened, I mean, it does seem like they're not willing to do that. They can't turn this into a massacre. They can't do a ground invasion, which is what would be necessary. They're even if they could do a ground invasion, they're not willing to do it because of the casualties, and it's just not politically possible. I don't think it's even politically possible to go back to a full scale air war like what was happening in March and April. I think they're in this. They can't. They're stuck. I agree with Greg. They're stuck, and they're not I think the problem is also when you have institutions, we have organizations that get into a difficult paralysis, where they're not even making bad decisions anymore. They just become incapable of making a decision at all because it's just like, well, because it involves taking some sort of loss or making some sort of sacrifice, but they're too. So it's basically institutional indecision. The term that's often used for it is vapor lock, when an engine freezes up. Except it happens with people, and you just have this group of people, and you're like, okay, how are you going to get out of this war? And they just don't know. I think even if you ask Trump himself, how are you going to get out of this war? He would just say some nonsense, and he doesn't even know how he's going to get out of it. I don't think anyone in the room knows exactly how they're going to get out of it. So that's why they're playing this game with the market, just threatening to and making big threats on Friday, and then then opening the market with pieces around to the corner. I think they're just doing it because they have no idea what they're going to do. I don't see a plan here, and I think that's my main objection to the liberal framework arguments that this is all 12-dimensional chess, 5-year plan. I don't think they even know it's going to happen next week. I think there's not any planning. I don't think they actually planned this out more than a few days. And when it didn't work, there's no exit strategy. They don't know what they're going to do. And Iran has all the cards here. And there's not a benefit in waiting. Also, if they're just going to destroy the Gulf states, like your theory is saying, well, there's no benefit in waiting. Why wait? Why don't you do it? If you're going, because the longer you wait, the more our own strategic reserves go down. Because the strategic reserve is pretty low right now. It's at its lowest levels since near its inception, since the 1976 oil crisis. It's never been this low. And if you want to sell oil, you want to sell it high. So if the oil infrastructure was destroyed, that would raise the price of oil. Then it would make sense. So there's why would they sell our strategic reserve for less than they could if they just did that? It doesn't make sense to drain. It doesn't make sense to drain the strategic reserve and then destroy the Middle East. You destroy the Middle East and then sell the strategic reserve. You don't do the strategic reserve first. That's why the strategic reserve exists.
Greg,
I just don't think there's much basis for the idea that this is a plan.
That the White House is at odds with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is pursuing his own agenda that is disconnected with what the White House wants to do, and so you kind of.
We have mixed kind of evidence because of the Israeli reports that the U.S. was hand in glove with them this weekend. So, there's some chance, I guess, that Israel's being positioned as a proxy to continue the war. But mostly, I think Trump is looking for a way out. So.
But that's the thing. It's like, Trump could have had a way out in February. And so to me, it seems obvious that Trump is not looking for a way out. And he's trying to manage.
What was his way out in February?
What? He could have agreed to rational terms. He could have stopped pushing that lie that Iran is trying to get a nuclear weapon. He could have stopped bombing Iran. He could have, Well,
he doesn't want to accept that deal. That's the point, because it's humiliating. That's why he's not. Doesn't why he's facing the problem is that that's why I just explained why he's freezing because he has the same problem now as he did in February. That it's a strategic defeat. That's humiliating. That's why that's the reason he doesn't want to accept the peace deal. But he doesn't have a different option either. That's why he's playing this game of kicking, of every weekend kicking the can down the road because he doesn't know what else to do. And that's why everybody was predicting, oh, he's going to, he's just rearming. And I was, I guess I was the minority saying, no, I think they legitimately wanted a ceasefire because they don't know what to do. And I think that's turned out to be correct, because why wait? I mean, there is an explanation. I mean, you're right. Why didn't he accept the peace deal in February? Well, the reason he didn't accept it because the peace deal sucks for him. It's losing. He doesn't want to lose.
Yeah,
but he doesn't have any other options either.
I see that as theater, and I just kind of don't think that it's individual.
Well, why? For what purpose?
Not wanting to be, taking a loss that are, I just see. I see things different. I mean, we're talking about planning. I mean, I see this being planned. I see China seeing the plan. I see China taking strategic efforts to counter the plan. And so I don't know. I just kind of reject that it's just being all done ad hoc by one person and his refusal to, want to look bad. Like, I just don't find that as a persuasive explanation for what's going on. But I get that, it's what the media is definitely promoting. Like that's the ultimate explanation that is being promoted. But I think there's a much deeper analysis that doesn't look at these things as accidents, right? I mean, the planning that went into it, the behavior that's going on right now, the capture of market share, the dependence, the growing dependence of Europe and Asia on U.S. energy, the export capacity, being developed back in 2012 when it was not profitable to do so because of cheap Middle Eastern oil and cheap Russian oil, and then the subsequent wars in Russia and the subsequent wars in Iran. Like, I mean, to just chalk all of that up as coincidence, I'm going to reject that. But yeah, we're
that's not coincidence. I mean, there's coincidence. I mean, there's an explanation. Well, I mean, they're selling the oil because that stabilizes the global market and keeps the prices down. If America wasn't dumping their strategic reserve onto the global market, prices would be higher. That's one of the major reasons.
It's not a coincidence that the United States.
I mean, it's not a coincidence. He doesn't want to. It's not a coincidence. I just gave you the reason. It's not a coincidence.
The bigger there is a coincidence that shale oil.
Literally just told you the reason that they're.
No, right. Okay. So here's what I'm asking you is a coincidence. So the coincidence
there is a coincidence in here.
Invested hundreds of billions of dollars in huge LNG ships, those big bubble ships. Dozens of them, I think, that transport expensive U.S. Gas to Europe, and then they unloaded at special facilities that were created to do that. All of those investments just happened to be made when it made no market sense to do that. And so, okay, go ahead.
The shale oil boom was not part of a conspiracy. It just happened, right? That shale oil's been there a long time. Everybody's known about it. They figured out how to extract it around 2010.
Yeah.
That is coincidence with all this. And that we have, I mean, it's been there. They just couldn't get at it. It's
I know, but
oil industry always wanted it.
Why do you invest hundreds of billions in energy export infrastructure when there's no market for it?
Because
the coincidence is that it just so happens after we did build up this energy export infrastructure that the competitors got attacked and their energy got taken offline. That's a coincidence. And to me, I'm seeing that as a business model of the U.S. mafia, right? That's just the business model. And so it's not a coincidence, and it's what has been planned and what was planned when this huge investment started taking place. The people that were investing hundreds of billions of dollars in the energy export infrastructure were given guarantees that their competition would be destroyed. Because if they weren't, it would not have made any
There's
market
no
sense.
evidence for that, Billy. The oil industry does not need to be promised their competitors will be destroyed to go after new oil discoveries.
Not going after new oil discoveries, investing hundreds of billions to export those discoveries to markets that they're not competitive in. You understand? Like, they're not competitive. Like, U.S. LNG is not competitive with Europe with Russian prices. But again, they were given assurances.
The LNG only came because of the shale oil. It wasn't a goal per se. When you drill for oil, you get gas. So the U.S. had a lot and was trying to figure out what to do with it.
But no, so again.
Yeah, it's a byproduct. Actually, the Saudis.
Right. I mean, they're burning it. They flare it if they don't have a market for it.
Yeah,
okay,
Saudis flare it.
Why are you
Gulf states flare it because
they in hundreds of billions in export logistics, in order to access a market that'll never buy your product unless you've been guaranteed that, don't worry, that market will still
why would they
open
not
up to you.
buy it?
And I don't know that all this was, I mean, like this Alaska terminal, people like to use the export terminal Alaska as the big proof of this, right? You know when that comes online?
Well, it's not the big proof of this, in my mind,
Well,
and I don't know when it comes online, but I think the big proof of this is the facilities in Europe and in the United States that were created that they either liquefy the gas and then ship it, or they turn it into a gas and ship it and then turn it back into a liquid. I'm not sure, but there's a process at both ends. There's terminals that turn it into a transportable form. Then they transport it on those big bubble ships, and then they change it back to the usable form once it gets there. All of that logistics and energy infrastructure was being heavily invested in when there was no market for it, because those markets, the U.S. LNG could not compete with the cheaper energy that already existed.
The European market's been there for years.
Okay.
The European market's been there for years. Nord Stream was destroyed almost 4 years ago.
The only response I'm hearing is, yes, that was a coincidence. And I just kind of refuse to believe that. Because
now you're not making your point. No.
No what?
Well, European markets has built for 4 years now. 4 years now. They want more American LNG. They have they have LNG terminals. They want Nord Stream was 4 years ago. I mean, why? I mean, that's a lot of time to say, oh well, right. So that's been 4 years. You say, oh well, there's no reason for them to build more LNG terminals and ships. Well, of course there is. Europe wants more American LNG. And if you remember, Biden. Can you let me finish?
You're not dealing with my argument, and I'm thinking it's because I'm not explaining it. I'm talking about 2012, hundreds of billions of dollars invested in 2012.
Well, why would they need to blow up the Gulf states?
So they make Asia and Europe dependent on U.S. energy.
Okay, so why would they need to destroy the Middle East to sell LNG to Europe? Europe does not get LNG from the Middle East.
Oil. They get oil. Europe got a lot of oil that it's not getting now, and same with Asia. Asia and Europe got a lot of oil from the Middle East. They're no longer getting it. And U.S. distributors have record market share and record profits. That's just a fact. So, I mean, again, you can say that it's not part of
gas and oil aren't the same thing.
What?
So oil and gas aren't the same thing.
No, yes, oil and gas are not the same thing. That is correct. But what is so anyway, I mean, I don't see coincidence. I see an obvious plan. And again, I think China saw the same obvious plan, and that's why they built up over the past couple of years.
So in your theory, in 2012, the U.S. government was promising the oil companies that within 15 years, their major competitors would be attacked and destroyed?
Yeah. That's my conspiracy theory. And that explains why they went to this ridiculous investment that made no logical market sense. And they wouldn't have done that unless they had certainty that it was going to pay off, that the United States would take their competitors. And by the way, their competitors were far, far more competitive. Like their competitors had a product that was 3 times better than their own product, and that's the foolishness of investing in energy export infrastructure when your competitor's product is 3 times better. It makes no business sense. And so my inference from that, knowing history, knowing how the mafia works, is that there was guarantees made, there was planned wars coming, and we're seeing an obvious a rolling out of this strategy that was predicated on capturing global energy supplies and making monopoly and capturing markets.
I find it pretty far-fetched that the government under Obama was telling the oil companies that the whole Middle East would be destroyed, Russia would be constrained, and it's golden ahead. I mean, and we didn't hear a peep of it.
It's a result of desperation. It's a result of desperation and the feeling that something must be done.
I don't think the LNG market is dependent on destroying all competition either. I don't think that's even a true statement.
Right. I mean, there's an alternate explanation.
They might say, they might not expect a larger.
Destroy the pipelines that Russia feeds Europe. I mean, you're never going to be able to open up European market share without destroying the Russian
Billy,
pipeline.
there was already a trend of, remember, green energy, and natural gas is supposed to be the transition. So, I mean, there was talk of a big expansion in natural gas use for a long time. That's what's supposed to replace the coal plants until we have solar.
Right.
And
sure, there was going to be a market, and if the U.S.
Germany
market, what are you going to do? You're going to destroy the competition, and that's exactly what happened. So,
Ian,
I mean, it's.
I don't think the U.S. government even plans 15 months ahead. I mean, I don't think they made a plan.
No, I mean, we just there's a difference. It's like, I mean, so and I see parallels, right? I see parallels in history.
I would say even the way Ukraine.
The way Ukraine.
Ian?
Oh, I don't think that's 15-year chess either. I think Ukraine was just kind of they had this vague, anti-Russian, trajectory in Ukraine. But to say it was all a brilliant plan, that with every single thing that happened to Ukraine being a brilliant chess move, I don't think that's even an accurate description of what happened.
Right.
Either. I think a lot of Russian responses were a surprise.
Right. The white paper said, make sure you stop short of a war.
Said what? Make sure what?
The white papers, about pressuring Russia, that the Ukraine strategy, you can read about what we were doing, said avoid the war. Don't let it become a full war.
Yeah, I don't know
like that
what white paper you're referring to.
The Rand Corporation paper, extending Russia.
No, it seems obvious that they wanted to provoke a war. And if they didn't, why would they do?
No, if you look at any,
it was Biden's fuck up, actually.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And so there's two perspectives, and that's a valid one, right? And you guys are promoting a valid one, and I'm feeling defensive, and I'm feeling like I want to, demonstrate how mine is actually correct. But honestly, a lot of people adhere to your framework And that it's just, it's a fuck up after fuck up. But here's what I was going to launch into. When we think about World War II, when we think about, what's going on right now is maybe the precursor to World War III. What do we see happen? Like, it was really the pursuit of global hegemony, making the world safe for capitalism. And the big threat was socialism. It was an ideological threat. So there was socialists domestically in Europe, and then there was the heartland of socialism, which was the Soviet Union. And the West, wanted to deal with that. And so they began, bringing fascists to power. They brought fascists to power where the socialists were the strongest. Italy, socialists were the strongest in Germany. So that's where the fascists came to power. They armed them, they funded them, they put them in power, they built up their war machine, they suppressed domestic dissent, and then they worked to navigate them and unleash them on the Soviet Union. All that was done behind the scenes. And I kind of feel like if you guys were living in those times watching that play out, you wouldn't see the forest for the trees, because you would think, oh no, Chamberlain wants peace. You heard him. Chamberlain wants peace. No, Chamberlain wanted to usher Germany into attacking the Soviet Union. That's what it was about. It was about global supremacy, destroying the Soviet Union, pacifying the planet, for the, to further.
So was it Chamberlain's plan? Was it Chamberlain's plan to get his army pushed into the channel?
No, so these are contradictions, right? Nothing is going to flow perfectly. There's going to be things that you have to deal with, and that's the same thing that's going on now. And you guys would have pointed to, Chamberlain lost. It's over. No, and
it's not. So, what you're saying about Chamberlain isn't new. Pat Buchanan said that, and I forget when his book was published, like 1998, something like that. He said it was British brinkmanship that started World War II. It's not a new theory. It's not even a Marxist theory. I think it's just there's a lot of evidence for that. Yeah, the British wanted the Soviets and Germans to fight each other. They didn't expect Hitler to attack West instead of East first.
It's more than that. It's the British created, facilitated, and ushered Germany into the Soviet Union. It's not just that they passively wanted them to fight. You know what I'm saying? And I think there's similarities. I think there's parallels. I think if we look at the world today, we can understand that China is the biggest rival to Western imperialism. And that, there's
if we were in World War II,
there's an overarching pursuit for global hegemony and to destroy these rivals that represent obstacles to the Western ruling class ability to behave with impunity and just to, have total hegemony. And so they are working towards, getting us to a point where, they can bring things to a point and, do their best to quote unquote contain China, which is really, subvert and destroy it and weaken it. And again, just like we saw in World War II, they are willing to sacrifice the global economy. They're willing to cause hundreds of millions of deaths in the process. Like, this is not, this is not unparalleled. And so when you guys, kind of have these glasses on that just sees everything as a coincidence or just bumbling around without any overarching objective or goal, it just is ahistoric, and it's not convincing. But I get that you could see it that way. A lot of people see things exactly that way, and I think if you have an appreciation, understanding,
that's not what we said.
This drive
for global, we said at all. That's not what either of us said. That's not what either of us said. Neither of us.
Explain. How did I?
No, we said we didn't. Neither of us. I don't think either of us at any point said that there's not like an overarching objective. Like, I'm sure it's true they want to weaken Russia. Maybe it's even true they want to weaken China.
But there's no plan.
What we're arguing against is that what we're arguing against. We didn't even say there's no plan. We just said this particular plan you're pushing doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense.
What's the plan, guys?
Draining the strategic reserve.
What's the plan?
I mean, it's just, well, I mean, I don't think the plan is to drain the strategic reserve right before an election. I don't think that was the plan. I don't think they wanted to do that. So just, I don't think any
So the
president
plan
wants to
doesn't
empty the
involve any of the
strategic reserve.
conscious decisions that they've made. So there's a plan, but it doesn't involve any of the conscious decisions that they've made and they continue to make.
Well,
Those aren't part of the
I mean, it's based on the statements that you claimed that the Iran war is going the way it expected to. You're like, oh, well, they deliberately lost in Iran. They're deliberately draining the strategic reserve. They're deliberately wrecking the world oil economy. I don't think that's true. I didn't bring up your World War II analogy. I feel like to bring up your World War II analogy, I think if we were streamers in World War II and the British lost Singapore, you would be telling us that the British deliberately lost Singapore. It was like their plan for Japan to conquer Singapore and defeat all of their troops and sink all their ships and say, well, that was just the plans, your liberal framework, you think. I mean,
wouldn't I say that it's a contradiction and that they haven't given up? It's just one of the contradictions of their strategy. No strategy just works perfectly forward without any setbacks. You know what I'm saying? And so that would be actually what I would say. And I think it would apply precisely in Singapore, just like it applies to Iran now. So I don't know why you wouldn't see that.
Okay, well, let's find a good note to close the show on because it's late
feedback, and when I get frustrated, negative feedback. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. I do get defensive, and then it's probably, yeah, I don't know. I don't know the solution to to be able to discuss our differences better. But I mean, it's interesting, and I'm. What I would like to do is just learn more about your guys' actual perspective, and when I try and understand it, it doesn't make any sense. But and then I hear detractions of my perspective, and I'm like, well, those aren't fair detractions because it's kind of a straw man, and I really think this, and then I'm trying to explain why my my perspective is consistent and makes sense, and it does not get diminished by your guys' detractions. Anyway, yeah, no, it's pretty much where we ended the last time we convened, the three of us. What's interesting though is how our two different frameworks predict the future. And my prediction is dire. My prediction is the future it's going to get a lot worse, and it's intentional. And if you guys are correct, then things might not get that bad. The U.S. might just whimper out, and we'll have our multipolarism because of the Suez moment. Like Ian said. But can we agree with that? Like, is that something that can be said? It's like future events will give greater legitimacy to one of our frameworks than the other, or is that not fair?
I think it's fair.
So peace in our time. I'm completely wrong. If things continue to go off a cliff and there's either renewed bombing or just no solution, and the economy continues to plummet, and we have like a Great Depression worse than the late 20s. I don't know. I think that's being purposely pursued, and that's the actual objective. And that's why I think we're going to get there, and when we do, it'll be vindicated.
Well, we may get there either way. I mean, because of all the damage. So I don't know if a bad economy is going to be proof of intention.
What about a proxy war against China?
That would be proof.
What about I mean, I don't know. There's already an embargo against China, you can say, but I mean, I just expect the embargo to continue to tighten, right? There's going to be continuing efforts to isolate China, to develop a coalition against China, to use energy dominance, energy control to force other countries to adopt policies that are anti-China. And this is just what we're seeing play out, and it's all part of the same strategy of hegemony and going after the primary obstacles to Western hegemony. But so if we over the next year, 2 years of Trump's term, going into whoever comes after Trump, if we don't see this policy playing out, yeah, no, for sure, I will admit I'm totally out to lunch and wrong. But I just don't see that that's going to be possible to happen. And I feel bad because Ian dropped off, and then it devolves. It devolves into me getting frustrated, then you guys getting appalled that I can't change my rigid perspective. Ian, you came just in time to say goodbye. Any closing thoughts?
I mean, one way of measuring is if and when oil finally goes up to 150, does Trump shift gears? That'll be a test. If you're right, he won't. If Ian and me are right, that would cause us to wind up the war.
Yeah. So you're suggesting in the event that oil happens to through whatever mechanism, the futures price goes up to $150 a barrel. That'll put a lot of pressure on Trump to make peace with Iran and to stabilize the global economy. And if oil goes up that high, and if Trump does not make some concessions in order to stabilize the economy, if he just continues to navigate the economy going off a cliff, then it suggests that I'm correct. Okay.
Yes.
Do you think it's likely that that oil will get that high?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, but it seems like the inventory drawdown is going to be critical soon.
Yeah, no, and I think, but like you guys are right? Because on the one hand, you're going to have a supply is going to go down, but also that's going to create a depression and a decrease in demand too. Like you're saying, people aren't going to be out buying all the things that energy makes, and again, I think this is just what they're managing. I mean, we're at the very beginning of it. They're managing it. They're pushing us in this direction. And they're going to be managing the contradictions of this effort to create a global energy monopoly, weaponize that monopoly to isolate China and to harm China. And that's just the overarching, strategy that's being pursued. And I don't know, like, I feel that you're saying that that's not true, that everything is just a coincidence. Am I just rehashing everything again because I have a character defect? Is that what's going on? I apologize. Ian, any final thoughts? And I don't even need to run. Like, if you guys are, gluttons for punishment and want to share information or perspectives.
No, well, let's aim for Friday. My connection's falling apart, so let's
okay.
Let's have a closing thought.
Okay. Closing thoughts. My thought is, things are going to get worse, and that's the plan. You guys things could get worse, and it's not necessarily a plan, and I think that's fair.
Good discussion, guys.
Go ahead. What's that?
I said good discussion, guys.
I hope so. I hope it's appreciated. It can be difficult. So yeah, we'll reconvene on Friday. Today is Tuesday. Yeah, we'll reconvene on Friday. It seems that something big may happen between now and election day, or the big thing could just be the result of a daily attrition of the global economy, and that could just be the big thing. But that's the direction we're headed, and it's impossible to see that Trump is again interested in fixing it, or I think he's able to. I think he definitely could. If the perspective that Israel is being the problem and just pursuing his own interests, I think Trump has the tools to to bring Israel to heel. I don't really think that's what's going on, but if that's what's going on, Trump can definitely with the power of the United States and all the things that we do for Israel, that's a big leverage over Israel, and we can force Israel to come to heel. We can force a settlement. We can definitely stabilize things. And so I think that's the fact that that's not happening means that they don't want it to happen, because it could definitely happen. It could have happened a long time ago. But if it doesn't happen, we're going to see the midterms, and we're going to be in a much worse situation. Airlines are already going under. And it's just going to be a big mess, and that's the expectation. So we'll be back monitoring it. Again, the name of the show is Exposing Imperial Decline, and I think that's what we're doing. We're granularly exploring how the empire is in decline. We're debating the exact mechanisms. We're debating what's going on, but we're observing the empire in decline. And one thing we're doing is we're calling bullshit to the establishment narratives, because I think we can all agree that the establishment press, the mainstream media, they are selling us a bunch of bullshit. It's got nothing to do with our fear that Iran is going to, nuke us. That's not what's going on. All right, guys, we will see you maybe Friday. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, Billy. See you.